The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation. I am Dan Besbris. It is All-Star Week, which means not the week before the All-Star game. It's the week after, where we got nothing to do for a few days, but just sit and wait for basketball to come back. We haven't really talked about the games from Thursday of last week, and there were 3 of those, so we will cover them, but obviously no reverse chronological lightning round weekend to go over. Some all-star festivities that we can recap a little bit, but overall, my guess is that today's show is going to be just kind of a resettling for all of us, an opportunity to take a little deep breath in between deep fantasy analysis. We're going to have some mailbag shows this week as we get set for games to return. We'll talk some gambling at some point this week. I don't know exactly what show I want to have that. And then we'll get back into basketball when games resume on Thursday. That feels like a long way from now. By the way, also the DFS contest will be on Thursday, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on in today's show as well. So not a ton on the docket, which I know is, again, a terrible way to open up a podcast, but here we are. I did want to take a brief moment to give a shout-out, and it came from a couple different locations, and this surprised me, and it's really cool, actually, because I didn't realize how much people liked it, but the DFS contest from last week, which, not surprisingly, a little bit more lightly attended leading up into the All-Star break, and this one again on Thursday this week, I'm guessing will probably also be a little bit more lightly attended. We had a couple of winners, and I didn't have a chance to congratulate them, so we're going to do that on today's show as well. I am Dan Besbris. You likely know that already. And if you're listening to an NBA fantasy podcast on the Monday after the All-Star break, you are truly among the degenerate, because you knew damn well that I wasn't going to have a whole lot of things to really dig into. I put out another thing that we might spend a little bit of time on was my massive center list from last week. I think a lot of folks wanted me to give a little more detail on that, so put that on your docket as well. First thing, however, is know that you can follow Hoopball. Hoop-ball.com is the website, at HoopBallFantasy, at HoopBallTweets. I am at Dan Besbris on Twitter. And I want to give a big thank you here over the All-Star layoff to our partners at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. HawaiianIsles.com is the website, at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter. Or you can just find them on Amazon Prime, baby. Get it 2 days sent to your doorstep. Search for Hawaiian Isles at Amazon.com. I spent the weekend in Yosemite. Some of you guys saw my tweets, I'm sure, that I had run off into the mountains, and I posted a picture of my freaking adorable kid playing in snow for the first time, and it was crazy, people. But I have a few thoughts. Number one, I had to learn to put on chains on a car this weekend, which I get it. I know, you're an adult, and you had no idea how to... Yeah, okay, fine. Listen, I live in Los Angeles. We are given cars. It's a rite of passage here. You just get a car, and then you just drive it places. You don't have any idea how it works. All you know is how to turn it on and how to zoom around people that are going too slowly and yell at them for going too slowly. That's Los Angeles driving. That's how we do it here. If you understand how the car works, you're probably not even from LA. You moved here, and you're like, oh my God, there's an incredible need in this town. There's 95 billion people in LA that all drive, and not one of them knows what to do if their car isn't working right. But I learned how to put on chains, so that was cool. So over the weekend, I became a man. I made this joke on Twitter, but they tell young Jewish boys such as myself that that's what happens on your bar mitzvah. But no, it's 23 years later when you actually put chains on a car, crumpled over in sludge on the side of the road at the base of a mountain, rolling underneath an automobile. That's, by the way, when it happens. But it was awesome. It dumped. It was crazy. The snow was coming down all weekend long. Cars were buried. Shoveling was had. And it was good to escape a little bit. And it was also very difficult to get both there and back. But it's good to be home, good to be settling back in, sort of calibrating to life among the regular folk, the land of the living, civilization. We're back, and that was my weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed President's Day weekend as well. Didn't get to take President's Day off because there's stuff happening, and, wife had to go to work today too, so that might be the bigger reason for that. You guys might have been stuck without a podcast today if she didn't have to work. First things first, massive congratulations to our winners from the DFS contest last week. Again, I was not in the contest because what day was that? It was Wednesday last week, and the kiddo had to go to the doctor, so we didn't have afternoon coverage. So he ended up napping on me, and I figured, all right, well, fine. If he's going to nap at like 2:30, I'll take an hour buried under the child to set my lineup, and then my laptop fried. Something's been horribly wrong with that hard drive for a long time. It's a real lemon, and I couldn't get into the contest, so I had no idea who won. But now I do. So a massive congratulations to our winners of the contest from last week. Gerardo Rodriguez. See? You were worried I was going to call you Gerardo. Don't worry. I got you, baby. I took 4 years of Spanish in middle and high school. I still got it. Gerardo Rodriguez taking second place in the contest. That means he wins the coffee goodie bag from a Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. That's getting sent up to the Pacific Northwest. Gerardo, enjoy. I'm certain you will. And the winner overall, number one in the contest last week, Danielo Cancela. Hope I got that one right. East Coast. Live in the East Coast style. You'll be getting a Hoopball t-shirt. That'll be coming your way when the mass Hoopball t-shirt mailer goes out. Pretty sweet. Congrats, guys. Looking forward to this week. Again, that contest is on Thursday. Stay tuned. We actually have the link already, believe it or not, and we'll get that posted later on today. But I would say it's not a top priority right now because it's Monday. The contest is Thursday, and most of you are going to forget about it between now and then. And we'll just, we'll set reminders. Easy enough. I'm excited to get back into it this week. I'm going to make sure I set my lineup from my desktop computer. I think. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Fear not, everybody. We'll figure it out. So that's the winners of the DFS contest last week. If you want to get involved in this one, just stay tuned. It's over at DraftKings. It's a lot of fun, and we'll have that link for you momentarily. All-Star Weekend. I DVR'd it, and I watched it late into the evening yesterday. We got home from our vacation super late, put the kid to bed super late, and then attempted to keep my eyes open while watching basically just the three-point contest and the dunk contest. So we'll go spoilers here. So if any of you haven't watched it yet, either tune out for the next little bit or go watch it and then come back to the podcast. But a big congratulations to Joe Harris and Hamidou Diallo for winning the three-point and the dunk contest. Those are the only two things I really watch. I know people watch the skills competition. Some people just choose to watch none of it. I actually happen to enjoy those two parts. I don't care what you guys say. They're still fun. Joe Harris was a pretty goodly underdog in the three-point contest. In fact, I think if memory serves, and you guys can go back to our Friday pod where I read all the numbers out, I believe he was the underdog of the competition, which did feel like a pretty good value. He's one of the top three-point shooters in the NBA. He's been doing it on a pretty good volume. And sure enough, bested Steph Curry in the finals and Buddy Hield in the finals by rolling his money ball rack both rounds. He got 20 points on those 10 balls, and that's how you do it, man. You got to maximize your points. I think it's silly, by the way. I think we should get rid of the money ball. It should just be 25 basketballs so that you can compare the numbers over eras as they change rules. It does kind of screw things up. You have to separate the different contests and make sure that the rules are all the same. Maybe I'm crazy and maybe my memory's foggy, but I don't think they had a 5 money ball rack 20 years ago. Pretty sure that's a more newish addition. And I'm only saying that I'm not 100% certain because, I don't know, man, the years run together a little bit. Buddy Hield was one that we liked here at Hoop Ball. He did make the finals, but ultimately didn't make it through. I don't even remember who I said. I might have said Seth Curry. I thought he might try to show up his brother, and he was okay. But Steph is just crazy, man. I almost feel like he just sort of, in fact, he and Joe Harris both almost looked like they were just coasting during the three-point contest. That's crazy how good some of these guys are at shooting the basketball. And then big-time ups to Jonas Nader over at Roto World. Jonas, who many of you know, we do a podcast together with Scott Bogman over on the In This League feed. It's called The Real Big Three. I'll be giving him a shout-out when we record that episode. Either, I assume we're doing one tomorrow, but if not, there will be one next week. He called it, man. He called Diallo as the dunk contest winner. He's basically the only person I've talked to that had Hamidou as the guy. Everybody else was rolling Dennis Smith Jr., and it seemed like the world wanted Dennis Smith to win this thing, and he still couldn't do it, even with a gift score on his second dunk in the finals. Dude, Diallo jumped over Shaquille O'Neal without touching him. That's crazy. And then dunked Vince Carter elbow style. That was amazing. Go watch this thing, guys. It's fun. It's fun. Watch it on half or 2 times speed. Skip the commercial break. The whole thing will take you an hour. It's worth it. You got nothing else going on this week in the NBA. Go watch the 3-point contest and the dunk shootout. And, crack a beer open or whatever it is and go enjoy yourselves. The other thing I wanted to spend a minute on today's podcast is the rankings of guys right now for a couple of reasons. Number one, we really get carried away with the concept of the ranking. Rank these 7 guys, rank these 15 guys, whatever it is, rank them. First of all, in a lot of cases, guys are so close and you're sort of buttressing a few different factors that it's not even, there's no point in actually assigning rank to them. I'll give you an example of this. The example of this is Jahlil Okafor and Dario Saric, who I've mentioned last week were 2 of my favorite pickups coming out of last week. And people are like, well, which one would you like to have more? This is why ranking is nearly impossible when guys are this close, and even more so when you get to this point in the season. I'm using these two guys because I actually really like both of them right now. Still, despite Okafor coming off the bench in that game before the All-Star break. I like them both for similar reasons. Number one, it feels like the Wolves are ready to turn the keys over to Dario at that power forward spot. He's the starter. He's going to see more minutes on a night-to-night basis. When you're the starter and you're in a timeshare, that means that you have first crack, basically, at getting more minutes. So if you play well out of the chute, you're probably going to win the timeshare. It's as simple as that. And if you play poorly, you still could win the timeshare, because if your backup doesn't play well, you get to come back in to finish the half anyway. And maybe you get to come in a little bit earlier if things are going not so great for the second unit. There's all these ways that you can end up with more minutes. Jahlil Okafor, similar situation. It feels like they want him playing more minutes down the stretch, and I don't know that Anthony Davis is actually going to finish out the year. It seemed like he would when he was sort of forcing his way back into the contest, but then he had that nebulous shoulder contusion that pulled him out just after halftime in their game before the break. However you slice it, it seems like the Pels want to get Okafor some more minutes. So for both of these guys, I like the fact that they're going to play more minutes. Second thing, I like both of them because we now know what they can do if given minutes. We know what Okafor can do if given minutes, and it's decent and seemingly improving. That's a thing, something to keep watch on. Does it ever fade? Maybe. We don't know. But we saw him play when he was younger, before he went through all these trials and tribulations, and we saw him do it for a couple weeks this year. When he gets playing time, he's going to put up some stats. Same deal for Dario Saric. We've seen it. The portfolio's there. He did it last season in Philadelphia. If he gets minutes and touches, the numbers are there from a fantasy perspective. But then people are like, all right, well, which one would you rather have more? To me, this comes down to a few key factors. Number one, upside. To me, the upside between these two guys is actually Okafor because of the blocked shots. They're so hard to find, and they're so great, and if you can isolate them, well, then you've got a guy that can change a category for you by himself. If you can find a guy that can change a category for you, that gives him the upside. But then, what about the safety leverage? That's probably Dario. If he's really starting for this team and he's playing with a bunch of guys that can't space the floor, he's safely going to be out there getting his three-point looks and rebounding. It's easy. It's safe. If Anthony Davis decides he wants to care for a couple of weeks, that could actually knock Okafor out of the lineup. He could. If they're playing a small team, they're not going to go Twin Towers in those spots, and that would end up hurting Okafor. So safety leverage, that's Dario Saric. Upside is Jahlil Okafor. They both are expected to get minutes. They both have nice fantasy stat sets when it comes down to it in different ways. And that's why when someone's like, oh, rank these two guys, I'm like, well, listen, this is more complicated question than what you think you're asking me. So you weight things. W-E-I-G-H-T, not W-A-I-T. You weight them depending on what you need more in your particular spot. I have multiple leagues where those two guys were available, and I went a different direction in different leagues. There's one where I feel like I can make up some serious ground in blocked shots, and field goal percent is a big deal for me in that league. So I went Okafor. There's another league where I need three-point shooting and free throw percentage. Those are more important to me. So I went Dario between the two. In that league, I have Miles Turner and JaVale McGee. I don't need Okafor's rebounds and block shots because I'm basically covered. Well, the rebounds are helpful, but I'm 100% covered in block shots. I'm so far out in front of everybody in that league, it doesn't matter. I don't need it. Fine, great. Sometimes you pick up the guy that you think is going to really perform, and then you try to flip him, but we're at that part of the year where fantasy trade deadlines are now coming and going. So even that strategy has serious holes in it. And that's why it's hard to rank these guys. But, all that being said, you guys asked me to rank what I think amounted to like 48 different guys, and I put them all in a list, and you can find them on Twitter. And without getting into the nitty-gritty of the whole thing, I wanted to mention a few of the guys in the middle whose fortunes may have been slightly adjusted thanks to what we saw towards the end of last week. One of the guys on that list that I had relatively low was Luke Kornet. It looked like he'd been pushed off the spot in New York, and he still might be, but with Mario Hezonja out, Kornet started and played 31 minutes, had a terrible shooting night, but in a Knicks victory. I mean, it was a brutal shooting night. I think he went 3 for 16, but all 3 makes were from downtown. He had 4 steals and a block. That's 8 cash stats. 11 points, 3 rebounds to go along with it. He's never going to be a big-time rebounding guy, and especially not if he's playing power forward alongside DeAndre Jordan and Mitchell Robinson. Robinson, by the way, studmeister. Absolute studmeister. Nothing's getting shifted on that dude's ranking. But Luke Kornet gets a bump up the list a little bit. I'm still petrified that Hezonja is going to come back and Fizdale's just going to say, well, Kornet was too good. We actually won a game with him in there, so let's go back to Super Mario and see what happens. But the one thing that does appear to be the case is that Noah Vonleh now is being phased out as they go into stretch tank time. He was their best player for the first 3 months of the season, and they're just not even going to use him here down the stretch because that's the modern NBA. You want to lose games now. It's losing time, everybody. DeAndre Jordan's going to have some value, seemingly the rest of the way. They're playing him. Mitchell Robinson's locked in. But so the guy, again, that I wanted to stress was Luke Kornet, because he was way down on my list, and many of you guys saw that. The list is dynamic, friends. And so here, with Hezonja out and Kornet just getting all of those power forward minutes, it became a pretty easy job to bump him up the list. I know you're going to say, well, where does he fall then? Where does he fall? It's impossible to know right now where he falls. I would love to take a shot on him, give him a week, see what happens, see if he can actually maintain this gig. It seemed like it fit pretty well to get him in there. A big dude, spacing the floor. That's the modern NBA. You got to have someone like that. So if DeAndre Jordan's going to be in there right next to the rim on both ends of the floor, and I know Mario Hezonja can space the floor a little bit, but he's just not good. He's not in their plans for the future. I don't know. Maybe Luke Kornet is. Maybe that's something they want to try to determine the rest of the way. And if that's the case, we know Vonleh he's not, maybe he's part of the future, but they don't need to evaluate him at this point. So you bump him up the list. That's the point I wanted to make on that guy. Marc Gasol gets bumped down the list a tiny bit, but also he remains a buy low. He's not going to play 19 minutes a game the rest of the way. We talked about that with Brew on the Friday show as well. Cody Zeller's been playing well. He's actually at a pretty reasonable spot on the list, kind of mid-pack, hanging around near that Enes Kanter, Rashawn Holmes contingent. And what I'd like to do is, and I'm not going to put out another list like this one again, but I know that a lot of you are really interested in my thoughts on all of these pickups, both centers and backcourt guys, and so I'll try my best to keep those updated on Twitter. As anybody moves up or down the list, I'll just send a note out that says, all right, this guy gets a bump or this guy takes a little bit of a hit. We have a lot to watch for here as we get set for the second, or it's not the second half. We're way past the halfway point. The stretch run, we'll call it, of the NBA season in terms of guys that could potentially emerge. And everybody's like, well, who's going to be the guy that emerges after the All-Star break? It's just not. Again, it's not like there's this list of dudes that are waiting to pop up. We've seen a lot of them already. That's the beauty of the trade deadline being before the All-Star break. There aren't things that are necessarily adjusting now that didn't adjust a week and a half ago. Let's quickly take a look at those games from Thursday from last week, and then we'll put a pin in this one. We'll call it just a nice, sweet little half-hour pod just to ease us back into the week. Orlando. Now that they're using Jonathan Isaac, or maybe now that he's confident enough to be willing to be used in their offense, they are stomping people. I can honestly say I didn't see this coming because it seemed like they were resigned to fate at a certain point 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And then all of a sudden, Jonathan Isaac became part of the team. He got involved. They didn't change things considerably from a personnel standpoint. They just sort of integrated him. The darndest thing. They're letting him take shots. He's part of the offense. And so he's more locked in on defense too. It's so simple. If somebody is engaged on the part of the floor that's kind of what you'd call the fun end, then they're going to play better on the side of the floor that's the work end. Anyway, they beat the daylights out of the Hornets in that game on Thursday. I know this is way after the fact, and you guys have long since analyzed these games, so we're not going to spend too much time on it other than anything that sort of jumps out as intriguing. Cody Zeller had 13 and 7 with a couple of steals. He made 5 out of 6 free throws. He's fine right now. He's a guy that I'm using in a couple of spots. He's just that very simple top 100-y center, and he likely will sit right around that mark the rest of the way. Please don't ask me about Marvin Williams. The whole team got shellacked in this game. If you're going to ask me if you should drop Marvin, you should ask if you should drop Kemba Walker, okay? Because they both stunk, and Kemba actually stunk worse because he went 4 for 20. At least Marvin only took 7 shots. So, layoff. They scored 89 points. The whole team was terrible. And the Magic are all suddenly relatively simple. Aaron Gordon seems set to be a disappointment again this year. I think that is fairly well locked in from a fantasy standpoint. Evan Fournier is starting to play a tiny bit better, but he's not going to get quite to where I was hoping he would get. Terrence Ross, ton of shots off the bench. He's going to shoot well sometimes. He's going to kill you others. Vooch, solid. And then Jonathan Isaac, who could legitimately be a top 40 guy the rest of the way. If you held on for as long as I wanted to, you win. We talked about New York already. Anything else on this team worth exploring? Not really. Kevin Knox got 22 minutes in this game. He did rebound, which was nice. And, of course, everybody gets numbers against the Atlanta Hawks. But I still think the story of this one was, does this buy Luke Kornet any more leash? And on the chance it does, he becomes a must-own guy because the threes, the steals, the blocks all rolled into one package makes him, you call it unicorn, right? Luke Unicornet. He becomes a must-own guy if he can hang on to these kinds of minutes. He's not going to shoot 3 for 16 every day. He took the most shots on the team in this ball game. I mean, he was on his way to if things start actually falling for him, to like a 20-point, 3-3, 4-steal, 1-block game. That type of upside is exceedingly rare, but again, we have no idea if he's going to play in their next ball game. He could just get phased out and Mario could be back, which would be brutal, but if it hits, you want to be there when it happens. I give it like a 15 to 20% chance of hitting, and you don't want to miss it if it does. Luke Kornet, Mitchell Robinson, these two guys, even DeAndre Jordan, we could end up with a Knicks team where all three centers are the guys who have fantasy value and nobody else, and all three of them could end up inside the top 75. DeAndre Jordan, if he doesn't take free throws, he's a top 50 guy, top 75 if he does take free throws. Mitchell Robinson's going to be a top 75 guy with those crazy blocks numbers. And Luke, I don't want to call him that. It's stupid. Luke Kornet could be a top 75 guy too. But the first two on those are pretty well locked in. Luke is the could be. Nice to see Dwayne Dedmon still getting minutes for the Hawks, even post-deadline. He seems solid. The note on the Atlanta side is Kent Bazemore, who played 27 minutes in this ball game, and it's the first time he's gotten over 19 and a half since coming back from his ankle injury. Unfortunately, it meant that Kevin Huerter only played 23 minutes in this game. Taurean Prince got 28, who started the game well and then just missed every shot from like the last 30 minutes he was on the floor. Trae Young, he's been playing better, but efficiency issues are still plaguing him, and that's kind of the story of those other pieces. The question really for Atlanta, and this was a fairly ugly ball game, so the minutes were not exactly where you'd expect them to be on a night-to-night basis, and it was a nice opportunity for them to lose to a bad team and find their way a little bit farther down in the standings. The question is there any way that Bazemore can get up into the 20s in minutes if the other guys are also playing the number they want him at, right? So like if Kevin Huerter was at 30, do those 7 minutes just come right out of Baze? Is that entirely where they came from? Could Bazemore get a minute or two from Taurean Prince? What if he gets up into the 30s in minutes? Where did those come from? So I'm still hugely skeptical of Baze getting the right number of minutes down the stretch. And it sucks because I have him in a number of places, or had him in a number of places where it's only a few teams I think that I've been able to actually hang on long enough. And I don't think people are picking him back up yet from this one game where he played a few more minutes. I do believe it's going to require more to get him back onto fantasy teams than what that one game could provide. But maybe I'm wrong. He happens to be available in most of my leagues, which I believe are relatively competitive. And we're going to keep a real close watch on him. He plays on the 22nd. That's Friday of this week. So his first game after the break is at home against the Pistons, and then a back-to-back on Saturday. If he gets up into the 20s in that first ball game, I would consider adding him at that point because Baze in the 20s is a fantasy asset. He's proven that over the last couple of seasons. He was averaging around 26, 27 minutes a game this year, just like he did last season. The steals, the blocks, combined the threes. He was up around 4 combined steals, blocks, and threes this season before the recent run where he just hasn't really been on the floor very much. That's a big deal. He wasn't a 1-1-1 guy because the blocks was at 0.8, but to get that type of number from basically a shooting guard, massive steal numbers, he's not a guy that can be left on the wire if he's actually getting mid-20s in minutes. But it's a big if right now. He hasn't cracked 19.5 in any of the games since coming back from injury. This was his 9th game back, so it's not like you can say, they were working him back into shape. This looked like one where the other guys just played poorly, and so he got a few extra minutes off the bench. So I'm not jumping at him yet, but he's going to be basically on a permanent watch list for me in case it actually starts to stick a little bit. But odds are it's not, because this team is going to want to lose more games down the stretch, and playing him more would give him an opportunity to win. And the last game on that Thursday card, and, again, I know this is sort of old hat, and you guys have long since done your Thursday regressive analysis here, but we haven't talked about it yet, and there were some interesting things in almost all of these games. Oklahoma City, for one, we got 22 minutes of Nerlens Noel in this ball game with Jeremy Grant on the shelf. So at least we have a little bit of knowledge now where if Grant goes down again, we've learned that OKC is not afraid to give Nerlens power forward minutes, and Patrick Patterson got stuck at just 15 and a half. That's an interesting development. He played alongside Steven Adams in this game. Not all center minutes. Steven Adams got 35 and a half minutes. Nerlens Noel got almost 22. That's about 9 minutes more than if they had just shared the center bucket, which is what they normally do. Something to keep an eye on. But with Markieff Morris getting signed and Grant probably back after the All-Star break, this likely becomes a non-issue by Thursday. But it's good to know in case we see a situation develop again in the future. You just sort of file that in the Rolodex. And then the Pelicans. Drew Holiday and Julius Randle, massive ball games. Kenrich Williams got back up into the 35-minute range and played better in this one. Etuan Moore played 17 minutes in the ball game and then suffered a knee contusion, All-Star break, and we'll see and all that stuff. Darius Miller logged 34 minutes in this game. Anthony Davis got the start and then left early in the third quarter with a shoulder contusion, and Jahlil Okafor picked up those extra minutes and ended up with 23. He was on his way to basically only playing about 16 minutes in this game, so AD's injury bought him another 7. And yes, that does make me a little bit nervous, because in this particular game, he actually had an opportunity to go 2 centers if they wanted to, with Adams and Noel on the floor on the other side, and they didn't. I still like Jahlil Okafor. It still seems like they want to get him minutes. It still seems like they want to find a way to sit Anthony Davis down. I think you got to at least sit on Jahlil in the hopes that AD either takes himself out or the situation just becomes so ugly that the league kind of relents and says, fine, you can sit this dude down. The distraction is worse than the payoff of getting your superstar in there. Julius Randle should have a huge stretch run. Should, mind you. I mean, we'll wait and see, but should. It's one of those odds-on kind of things. Kenrich Williams continues to rebound and do the hustle stuff very nicely. It seems like he's a guy that will probably also hold some minutes down the stretch for this team. They still had Elfrid Payton out, and maybe we see him after the All-Star break. How does that move bodies around? Well, Drew Holiday was the starting point guard in this game. If Payton comes back, they probably slide Drew to the 2, and then Darius Miller or Kenrich Williams probably goes to the bench. The question is, which one? Don't know. Frank Jackson didn't play at all. Tim Frazier didn't really play at all in this game. So if you were thinking it was going to be those guys that lose out when Payton comes back, it's not. It's going to be either Miller or Williams. Or maybe Elfrid just doesn't play much. That's the other opportunity there. So the Pelicans are certainly a situation to keep an eye on. Kenrich Williams is likely owned in your leagues because he went on that super hot run about 2 weeks ago, and he's been pretty good ever since then. He just had kind of that one bad game where they got whipped by Orlando. Otherwise, he's doing the hustle stuff. He's hitting shots at a decent rate right now. Not going to shoot the 3 ball. But and in terms of, I don't know, can we call him a specialist? He's a little bit specialist-y. He had that game where he hit 5 threes. I don't think that's something you can expect from him long term. You could probably look for 1. I think you could get 1 3-pointer out of him. And he's getting you some steals, he's getting you some blocks, he's getting you some rebounds. That's really what you're looking for with him right now. Now, it's just a massive offense in New Orleans. So that's what happened on Thursday. What do I really think about Anthony Davis? That's the last point on today's show, and then we'll wrap it up with a nice short one. What do I actually think is going to happen with Anthony Davis? Again, with the preface here, it's all sort of reading tea leaves and guessing. It's an educated guess. It's an hypothesis based on what we've seen so far. I do think he continues to play after the All-Star break, and I think you probably see him play hard for a couple of games in there. In fact, it looked like he was almost carrying a little bit in this game against the Thunder before he ended up leaving with the shoulder issue. But if you take a look at what they've got coming up, they're in Indiana on Friday. They host the Lakers on Saturday. They play Philly early next week. They've got the Lakers middle of next week. Multiple games against the team that is courting him the most. I think he probably plays pretty hard in those games if they let him. right? Like, if you're the Pelicans, what do you do in this spot? You'd actually rather lose these basketball games. You're probably annoyed with the Lakers, so you kind of want to knock them out of the playoff picture. But what's more important, a grudge match or your organization's future? If the guy's leaving you, you want the better pick. And they could very easily still find a way to get behind the Grizzlies. They could find a way to get behind the Wizards. They are behind the Magic now. And I was just talking about this on VSiN earlier today. The NBA draft lottery odds, everybody talks about the tank. You want to get in the bottom three, bottom three, bottom three. Everything's always bottom three this year. But it's not that simple. I know I'm getting sidetracked a little bit on the AD thing. Let's zoom back to the lottery odds in a second. On the AD front, I think he plays for at least 2 weeks after the All-Star break. And so if you're thinking about trying to punt on him, I think you have a couple of games. Let him showcase himself. And if you still have time before your own league's trade deadline, then you try to go get some late first-rounder for him at that point. Because I think we're going to get a couple of good games from him right out of the break. He's going to be rested. He's going to want to put a better taste in at least New Orleans' mouth, the fans. And then I think if we see any of this drama stuff pop back up again, you're going to see him crumple. Then they're going to be finding a way to get him down. Okay, the other point I wanted to make is the lottery odds. We just started to talk about that. Phoenix, New York, Cleveland, 3 worst records in the league right now. They all have a 14% chance of getting Zion. They all have a 14% chance of getting the number 1 pick in the upcoming draft. They each have the same percentage chance of getting the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th pick as well, depending on, again, how the balls shake out. And then 5th through 14th, that's where the actual difference in record comes back into play. Phoenix cannot have a pick worse than 5th. With the worst record in the league right now, the Knicks cannot be worse than 6th. Cleveland, 7th. Chicago, 8th, so forth. As you get into Chicago and Atlanta, that's now the 4th and the 5th worst records in the league. They still have a double-digit chance to get that top pick. Chicago, 12.5%. Atlanta, 10.5%. So you're trying to now gauge what are my odds increases. If you're Atlanta, you'd probably like to get worse than Chicago. But Atlanta's also been showing themselves to be kind of trying to win a little bit, and they're 5 games better than the Bulls right now. So that's going to be a tough tank to pull off. The Hawks are kind of in their own weird little bubble where they probably don't need to go into a full tank. They're probably stuck basically where they are. The secondary tier, this is an interesting spot. Memphis, currently the 6th worst record in the league, has a 9% chance of getting the first pick, and basically the same 2, 3, and 4. 9% chance of pretty much any of those top ones. Washington, 7.5% to get the first pick. New Orleans, 6. Dallas, 4.5. Orlando's trying to win. Miami's trying to win. Minnesota, Lakers, Sacramento. All those teams, as you get now towards the end of the lottery, those teams are all trying to win. So wipe out the top 5. Orlando, Miami, Minnesota, LA, and Sacramento. Wipe them out. We're talking at the bottom 9 right now. The bottom 4 are kind of in their own pocket, with the Bulls leading the charge. A whopping, 3.5 games ahead of the Phoenix Suns for the worst record in the NBA. Atlanta's in its own pocket, and then Memphis, Washington, New Orleans, and Dallas. That's the 4-team pocket that I think you really want to watch for bailing out on the season. I think you're already seeing a little bit of it with Dallas. Memphis obviously blew their team up. You're going to see the young guys try really hard for a little bit in Memphis, but then they're actually well rewarded for keeping the 6th worst record in the NBA. There's almost no chance they're going to get down to 7th worst. They've got like a 4-game gap between themselves and the Hawks. It's hard to cover that kind of range unless one team decides they really want to win some games. It would be really nice for them to get into that 5 spot from Atlanta. I don't think it's going to happen. Things drop, and then again, it's, percentage-wise, summation, it doesn't change all that much. The Memphis to Atlanta gap is 1.5% for that top pick. The Memphis to Washington gap is 1.5%. The Washington to New Orleans gap is 1.5%. Same deal to New Orleans to Dallas, 1.5%. But again, when you talk about it from a comparative standpoint, Memphis right now has twice the chance of getting the top pick as Dallas. You don't think that Mavericks want to try to slide into that spot instead? So look for that tank down the stretch. The Mavericks are 26-31. The Grizzlies are 23-36. That's a 4-game gap. It's tough to make up, but don't put it past them. Mavericks are trying to lose. Pels are lost in some sort of weird limbo. They should try to lose, but I don't know if they are yet. Grizzlies should be trying to lose, and they were for a while, but rejuvenated perhaps by a trade. The Wizards are not trying to lose yet. So there's an avenue there for some of these teams to actually make sure they can hang on to that spot. I might be getting my numbers slightly wrong on who has the worst record. The Pelicans are no, they are better than the Wizards. Okay, I got that right. So they could very easily fall behind the Wiz, and they should. And the Mavericks should fall behind the Wizards. Washington is really biffing their chances here. As you look at all of these teams, the one that stands out is the one doing things wrong, Washington. Terrible team, still trying to win. Stop it. Stop now, Washington. You still have a roughly 32% chance of ending up with a top 4 pick in the draft. Don't you screw this up. All right, let's put a pin in that. We went a little longer than expected today. I didn't think I had much to talk about, and then I always find something. Over the rest of the next couple of days, mailbag shows. I want some questions from you guys as we get settled in for the second half. We'll talk some DFS. I guess we'll have to bump that to Thursday this week since that's when we got the contest going on. We'll talk to Mike Apotria about that one. And then, of course, we'll get some games going. Maybe we'll do a little preview on Wednesday's show of what we got coming up out of the All-Star break. So tomorrow, mailbag. Wednesday, preview, post-deadline, or post-break, I should say. Thursday, DFS. Friday, we'll talk to Brew. Wrap things up here on the week of Fantasy NBA today. Folks, hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the President's Day. If you are off today, even better. If not, I hope this helped get you through part of the workday. And regardless, thanks for listening. This is Dan Besbris for Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball and Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee presentation. Enjoy your Monday. We will talk to you mañana.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.